For those who don't know Marius, Marius is, you might even call him Mr. Crypto in South Africa. He's the Africa General Manager for Luno. And he's well known to the African crypto community. Luno is a great South African success story, having grown to more than 7 million customers worldwide in less than a decade. And it's now headquartered in London. Marius, those figures are changing so fast, you might have to update us as to how many members you've got. But I know you hit the 7 million mark not so long ago. Marius joined Luno in 2016, and he helped the company grow to a diverse team of 450 people across 3 continents. He shares the company's philosophy of upgrading the world to a better financial system, and that means not just as a means of preserving and growing wealth, but making payments and transactions as well. So welcome, Marius. And you're going to be talking about the natural evolution of money and how Bitcoin and crypto fits into this. So over to you, Marius.
Thanks, Kieran, for the intro. Yeah, as been said, my name is Reitz. Just a very quick intro. I work at Luno, and Kieran, yes, we've actually signed up a million new customers since I think 2 or 3 months ago. So we're seeing good growth. We've expanded, across 6 continents. We've got teams established in most of those continents, but we're very proud of the fact that we have close to 400 people working at Luno in South Africa, between our Cape Town and our Johannesburg offices. But I'm not here to talk about Luno today. I'm going to talk about Africa at large and how cryptocurrency potentially benefit Africa as a continent. And before I do that, let me just share my screen, my slides. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm going to take you back to the year 1996. And 1996 was quite an important year in SA's history. It was the year when our new constitution was adopted. And Thabo Mbeki at the time gave a very important speech titled I'm an African, where he spoke about the African Renaissance, and he borrowed some of the content there from a guy named Sheikh Anta Diop, Senegalese, who first started writing about the concept of the African Renaissance in 1946. And before him, a guy by the name of Marcus Garvey, who wrote a poem named the United States of Africa in 1924. And all of these people were intellectual heavyweights, and they all spoke about the same thing, or all of their speeches or their philosophies there was one golden thread that connected them together. And they were all talking about how Africa can overcome its problems. Things around freedom of speech, dignity, individuality. And they all spoke about the importance of grouping together, about collaborating, about working together as different nations to overcome some of Africa's problems. And I think this really started, and one thing that's very important, and that they all agreed upon, was that human progress at large, not only in an African context, is largely driven by collaboration, consolidation, and economies of scale. We have seen this many times in the past. Long ago, firstly, the creation of nation states, when people moved from living in villages or hunting by themselves to the establishment of nation states, where people again grouped together. We've seen this with we've seen the urbanization, people moving to large cities to achieve economies of scale, to grow together as society, and also multinational companies such as Facebook and Apple, where people group resources to produce phones or goods cheaper and to achieve economies of scale. And I think a more recent example in the current context is during COVID-19, the global vaccine rollouts, and how the world across many different continents is collaborating to distribute vaccines and to roll out the global vaccination program. And I think it's really part of human nature. It's an inevitable part of society. And these 3 people, from an African perspective, realized this and they recognized this at a very early point. And later on, this concept of the United States of Africa, or the African Renaissance, was also debated at an African Union level, and it was explored. And in particular, the concept around a common currency for Africa. And I think it's important to realize that money is really no exception. A very important part of grouping together, for example, let's use the euro, for example, US dollar. When countries come together to do things together, to advance trade, to pool resources around thinking on a political level, certain economical policies, money is a very important part of that. It becomes integral to the thinking because, simply put, money is a very important part in trade. Money is a very important part in transacting with each other. If you look at this slide and you look at the pink dot, you see that represents the fiat currencies as we know in today's form. And it's really been around for 50 years or so. And that's typically governments printing money, or governments creating money, and money as we know today. And if you look at the next slide, the global map, you will see that we've actually had common unions or currency unions for quite a long time, and actually have currency unions around the world. You see the US dollar area in green. You see the francophone countries in West Africa using the West African franc, South African rand, and then one of the more well-known ones, the euro. If you look at this slide, 1792, that's the first time when someone issued government money. At the time, it was linked to gold, and although for us it's long ago, 230 odd years, if you look back over humanity's existence, it's really not that long ago. And if you look back to 600 BC, that is when people first started to use objects or gold coins or silver coins to transact with each other. The point I'm trying to show you is that for most part of our existence, we've actually collaborated at the level. We've actually had a common currency, a common global currency, regardless of whether you were in South America and you traded with someone in Spain or in other parts of the world. Gold coin or silver coin was a commonly accepted currency at the time. And as I mentioned, two recent projects, you can call them projects, the US dollar and the euro as well, just shows that when people together, that resources, money becomes an integral part of that. If we look at what a common currency for Africa could mean, and let's put crypto aside for the moment. Let's assume that Africa adopted the same currency. And this is a very busy slide, so don't try and read the details, but just at a very high level, each of these blocks or tiles represent a very important function that money fulfills across the African continent and globally. And if you look at the first one, remittances, each of these figures, it's based on research done, very different, studies are performed. But more or less, if you look at remittance market in Africa in 2019, it was estimated to be $40 million. And look at average remittance fees on that, roughly 10%, so $4 billion in fees gone to intermediaries processing these remittances. Same can be said for e-commerce, $30 billion size market in Africa, estimated by 2022. And then also other important factors like financial inclusion. So many people across Africa are still excluded from a financial system, and research suggests that as much as $1 trillion can flow into economies. Should people be allowed, and should people come online and people have access to the financial system. Many other different things, capital controls, studies done on capital controls also suggested that if capital control is relaxed, intercontinental trade can potentially increase by 52%, and this is something that we learned also from the euro. And our trade between different markets in the eurozone just grew and increased as people started to adopt the common currency in Europe. Yeah, so, and if we look at technology, and the exciting thing about technology is that all the savings typically go to consumers. So, using very, very simple examples, you don't have to pay postage anymore to send a letter. You don't have to incur exorbitant fees to call someone in Europe or the US with a landline. You don't have to call only during certain times of the day because it's a bit cheaper. Then you just really just use technology and you use WhatsApp, a WhatsApp call, and you incur a couple kilobytes, maybe a megabyte in data charges. So all this value that all the fees and all the value that I showed on the previous slide, and I didn't mention identity theft, which is something that's very prevalent across Africa, and that's things like fraud with credit cards and unsafe payments. Now, all this value typically goes to the end consumer. Sure, there will still be intermediaries, there will still be companies acting as trusted platforms in some events, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. But the pie will become much, much smaller, and most of the value will end up with consumers. So just staying on this slide, so how does crypto fit into this? I think looking at an Africa level, it's very difficult for governments to build these things and to collaborate if there's no political will. And fair enough, some countries are simply stronger than other markets. Some countries are based in conflict-ridden areas, so it really makes it very difficult to divvy this up fairly. And there's no incentive for 50 odd African states or countries to really work together to make this work. So I think what we're seeing and what we've observed from Luno's perspective, having been active in the African market in SA since 2013 and in Nigeria since 2015, is we've seen growth from a grassroots level up. We're seeing people, especially in markets such as Nigeria and other West African countries, where people find Bitcoin useful because it solves a specific need, or crypto. It solves a specific need that the current options or the current financial system is unable to serve or to meet. Then they will always rotate towards the better solution. So I think with crypto, we're seeing something that's neutral and based on its decentralized data, something that everyone can use, and there's no debate around whether one country is strong or better than the other country or not. I think something else that makes crypto interesting is its versatility. And I think we're also seeing, and that speaks to the fact that different cryptos for different purposes. Some people use cryptocurrency for payment, some people use it as an investment, and for many other different reasons. As we've seen crypto lending, people having the ability these days to put on crypto as security to obtain fiat denominated loans. So we're seeing many different use cases come to the fore. And I think we're also seeing more stable versions of cryptocurrency. If you look at some of the challenges that still have to overcome. So we're seeing, from a payments perspective, we're seeing stable coins, cryptocurrencies backed by traditional currencies, baskets of currencies that make it more suitable or better suitable for payments. And same on the investments case, we see crypto tokens that's backed by a basket of commodities even, that makes access to that easier. So our view is that a new financial system will be built from the ground up. And we've actually made a lot of progress looking back over the last 5 to 10 years in doing so. But this is not going to happen overnight. We're not going to suddenly see a shift towards cryptocurrencies overnight. And although we're seeing crypto in the media, we're reading about it in newspapers, we're seeing it on TV, at the Formula 1 and many other sports events these days, and there's a lot of hype to talk about. We're still very, very much in the early days. And we at Luno think that we're still in the asset phase where people predominantly enter the cryptocurrency market, seeing crypto as an investment. And I think that's where the mindset starts. That's where people start to think differently about money, and once they own crypto, what they can do with that. And yes, as we discussed, the transact phase will also, or crypto for transactions will also be very, very important. As two slides ago, all the value it can unlock to consumers, $4 billion in remittance fees being paid to intermediaries. I think we're just not there yet at this point. I think people buy crypto mostly for investment purposes at this point, and for many different reasons. As some of the experts on this program will also share later on. And so for many different reasons, Bitcoin is a scarce digital asset. So many people view it as a hedge against future inflation. Now, other people think that crypto will become more integrated into the financial system. It will play a more important role in how we transact with each other in the future. They assign a dollar value to that, and they take a longer-term position. The interesting part on the transact phase is people buying Bitcoin as an investment asset. Now, when they get the opportunity down the line, for example, to use Bitcoin to go through a paywall on your favorite media outlet, on Bloomberg, for example, then they will most likely use that. I think that way we will build up that critical mass of people that we need in order to really use crypto for payments. Then the last phase is a decentralized phase. That's where we don't, in very simple terms, need or use intermediaries to access financial services. While that is a very important phase, very interesting phase, I think the current problem is that people will need crypto to access DeFi, to access decentralized finance. And the current problem still is, especially across Africa, now, if you look at markets like Rwanda, Malawi, even more developed countries like Egypt, and even in South Africa, it's still very difficult for the average person to access crypto safely. So we think that there's still a lot of work that needs to go into building the infrastructure across the African continent for people to safely access crypto in order to participate in this new economy that we find ourselves in. So where do crypto exchanges like Luno fit in? People often refer to crypto platforms as cowboys, and I think we agree to some extent that yes, we are cowboys, but this isn't necessarily a cowboy. This person, can say it's maybe a bandit, and bandits force people that comes to your head. And one thing that we're not doing as a crypto platform and industry, I think, in SA, is that we are not forcing crypto down anyone's throat at all. We think that any tech revolution, any technology revolution, growth will be quick, and it is going to happen. And we are just trying to tame that, and we're just trying to make it safe and easy for everyone to access cryptocurrencies in a safe and secure manner. So if you go back to 1996, the year Thabo Mbeki made that speech, and we look at mobile phones, people that owned mobile phones in 1996 probably looked something like this. It was a big, clunky thing. It was difficult to move around, and in Africa in particular, less than 1% of people at the time owned a mobile phone. So in other words, the penetration was less than 1%, and it wasn't really useful because your supplier or business partner didn't have a mobile phone. So why would you own a mobile phone? Why would you use it? There wasn't immediately a net positive or net benefit to society. But 25 odd years later, we've seen in sub-Saharan Africa more than 90% mobile penetration across the continent. And I think ironically, the mobile phone perhaps did more for, when Thabo Mbeki made his speech in 1996. Now, he spoke about a lot of topics, freedom of speech, democracy, human rights, human development. But ironically, the mobile phone more, address those systemic problems across Africa than any politician in any parliament or any government. But if Thabo Mbeki said this in his speech in 1996, the role that the mobile phone would have played, people would probably have laughed at him at the time. So now, in closing, I think what the message I'm trying to say is that a lot can happen in 20 years. We believe that collaboration on a monetary level is inevitable, and we think it's already happening right in front of our eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marius. A question that bugs me a little bit is this whole question of money. What is money? How do we define it, and how does Bitcoin fit into that? And you discussed it quite eloquently, I think, how the whole payment system in Africa is just ripe for this kind of disruption. You still there, Marius, or have you've disappeared?
I'm here, Kieran. No, I'm
You're
here.
Still there. Okay.
No.
If one looks at people like Michael Saylor, who's the CEO of MicroStrategy, his company's invested $2.2 billion in both cash and loans into Bitcoin. And the reason that he's done this, and he's laid this out, and people can go and look on YouTube and see what his thinking is, that he just perceives, looking 10 years down the road, that the value of money is going to continue to depreciate because it's in reckless hands. I think words they use, I'm actually being kind. I'm not being unkind. Reckless hands, meaning that the rate at which fiat money is being printed into circulation is frightening. And anybody who's looking to protect themselves against that will be looking for some alternatives. Do you think, and are you seeing any adoption from companies, chief financial officers, CEOs in South Africa who are alarmed by what they see? Because if the problem is bad for the US dollar, it's worse for the rand. Do you see any adoption happening amongst companies in South Africa?
And yeah, we see lots of interest. We've had discussions in South Africa with financial, with managers and with other corporates. We've not really seen any corporates take action like we've seen in the US or in other parts of the world, and actually including crypto into their treasury and holding onto crypto. And I think it's mainly because some of the challenges we're still facing in emerging markets like Africa. We don't have this level of sophistication when it comes to things like regulations. The US is a couple of years ahead of us with license regimes. We also don't have, and as a result of that, we don't have the same level of trust in South Africa. So a company like Luno, which is a mass market retail platform focused on individuals, we're simply not able to manage $20 billion of once-off over-the-counter deals with large institutions. For that to happen, we need better infrastructure. And I think now the exciting part is that companies like Investec have been looking at this, and they're building their own custody solution, which will be catered towards large institutions. So I think as soon as we have the infrastructure in South Africa, Kieran, and as soon as we have, I think the first trigger will be regulation. As soon as that comes to the market, it'll definitely insert a bit of trust. If you look at banks, they've got track records of hundreds of years. The public trusts them, and the same cannot be said for cryptocurrency platforms at this stage. We have to earn trust from the clients. So I think regulation will be a trigger. We definitely see lots of institutions in SA sitting on the sidelines, but we just don't have the same level of infrastructure and sophistication with infrastructure and regulation in SA at this point compared to the US and Europe.
All right, Marius, thanks very much for that.